All right, so let me just start by saying thank you all for being here today and for your quick response when I sent the request for you to participate in this call. I am grateful for your willingness to be part of this. My hope is that we can chat about the re-entry of the Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation into this new normalcy and this new reality. I will give you just a bit of the background about Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation and the space that we just started in 2019, that we opened in 2019. We opened in August of 2019, quickly scheduled a full set of programs that our community enjoyed. We coordinated numerous activities from our wonderful PS 132 Juan Pablo Duarte School children's book. We booked book readings, art exhibits, census activities, financial literacy workshops, amongst many other activities that were held. It served as a meeting space for the community and community groups that did not have the space in which to meet. We collected over 2,000 guest names and created a process by which we would keep our community informed of upcoming activities. Local artists were grateful for the space where they could begin to share their work. Beautiful exhibitions took place, such as the Coño exhibit for the month of January by Ramon Veras, an exhibition about our namesake Juan Pablo Duarte and his legacy about unity and the importance of education. The most visited exhibit yet was the Dominican Carnaval by Carlos Viñals during the month of February. It quickly became a crowd favorite with its colorful masks and costumes. Children were in awe of this exhibit, and JPD staff enjoyed their visits and questions regarding Dominican culture. Today we have a wonderful guest. We have wonderful guests who will be sharing their thoughts about the foundation and its re-entry. Some will speak on the importance of raising the census numbers. And finally, we will meet Paloma, a Dominican visual artist who will hold her first exhibit in JPD Space and the first exhibition since we shut down due to COVID-19. So to begin, I'd like to introduce the first Dominican congressman and a soldier for this community, and someone who was largely responsible for JPD and the Dominican community receiving the space at the terminal of the George Washington Bridge, a beautiful brand new space that has allowed us to share our culture with our Dominican community. It is my honor to have with us tonight our Congressman, Adriano Espaillat. Hi, Congressman.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the group and the community. This Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation has been conducting cultural and folkloric activities for many years now, including the critically acclaimed festival on St. Nicholas Avenue, which is the heart of our community, and it's called Juan Pablo Duarte Boulevard. But in addition to that, I think that we've been privileged to have this space right at the gate of the George Washington Bridge. So in many ways, this is a marquee of our culture and our folklore and our history. And we should preserve it for as long as we can and highlight it across the community. Right now, I'm engaged in an effort to relaunch Northern Manhattan and the Northwest Bronx post-COVID-19 pandemic. I feel that we need to relaunch the community, and we have 5 buckets that we're working on. One of them is arts and culture. We're working on branding the neighborhood, making Espaillat Heights, documenting the sites within the neighborhood that are relevant to the Latino and the Dominican community that have been there my family has been there for over 60 close to 70 years now in Washington Heights. We still have a phone number that's in our family on 157th Street that's been with us for 65 years.
Wow.
So we have deep roots in that community. My grandparents came to Northern Manhattan before I was even born. I met them here in New York City. And some of my relatives were here since the 30s. So we have deep roots here in the community, and we have to showcase that and highlight that. And I think that it's important that we do that. And the center there at the GW Bridge is a great venue to accomplish that. And we'll work with you to ensure that the resources get here to the community, not just from government, but from the private sector, from foundations, that we're able to gain the resources necessary to continue to highlight our culture, our presence here, our contributions. Every enclave has it. Harlem has the Apollo, and Chinatown has its great food, and Little Italy also, it's there, and El Barrio has La Marqueta, and Julia de Burgos Center, and Harlem has the Schomburg, and we ought to have something. A million folks of Dominican descent should have something that highlights their culture, their folklore, their cuisine, their literature, their arts, the festivals that we do. And I think that's the Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation and the Center. And currently, they're engaged in a census fight to ensure that we get counted accurately, and that we don't lose the resources that we will lose if we don't count accurately. Back in 2010, we were the #1 neighborhood in the city, even though we are a hard to count district. And we want to duplicate that effort. So Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation and the Center there have been involved in the census work to ensure that we get counted for this 2020 census. And I want to thank Laura and her team and the board of the Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation for their efforts to ensure that our culture doesn't die, that it continues to be exposed to the rest of the city and passed on to our younger people. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Congressman. I can tell you that for me, one of the things that I'm most proud of is, obviously serving my community, but it's also having the ability to share my culture with other communities and other folks so that they could learn about us. And so this space has allowed exactly that. And so we're always happy to share the space. I know that it's a Dominican cultural center, but it is a community space as well. And so we always welcome everyone who is in need of space and allow them to share our space with us. So we're always open to anyone that has that need. So thank you, Congressman, for that.
Thank you so much, Laura.
And now I see that our Assemblywoman has come on. Hello, Assemblywoman, how are you?
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Good to have you.
Thank you for having this important conversation. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak a little bit about what we've been doing around the census. But first, before we do that, I want to thank you for your leadership and make sure that we recognize the work of the foundation as critical for not only the education and the preservation of culture of town. So I wanted just to give you a shout out on that. And I just want to just say that, as the Congressman already stated, we have been working to make sure that our numbers as far as census representation oversee what we've done in the past. Washington Heights has a popularity now because we've been one of the highest return communities in the census, but with that success also comes new obstacles, the obstacles of not having the resources of being a hard to count community. And so the monetary resources that are being pumped, this is my baby, she just got back from the park, so she's saying hi.
Hi, Mia.
the monetary resources that have been pumped into our community in order to make sure that that our community is counted, it is critical for us to make sure that we're hitting every area of the community. So one of the things that we've been doing, working with my good friend Juan, Rosa, the Congressman's office, and Laura, and the Census, is to make sure that we are not duplicating services. There were a number of organizations that were able to receive funding from the city of New York, and a few organizations that received money from the borough president's office to make sure that outreach was done in our community. So what have we been doing? We have been meeting, we have been coordinating our efforts, we have been supporting one another. This is about making sure that we're inserting the conversation of the census in every conversation that we have, every platform we have, every event we have, every opportunity we have. I'm actually wearing my The Presence is Latina shirt that I got from Naleo. Because the president is Latina, we have to give ourselves credit for being present and encourage not only our communities to be counted as immigrant communities, but mothers to make sure their children are counted. You know, tonight, as we stand here, the city council is negotiating a budget, and budgets are a reflection of our moral standing and where our priorities are. But in order for us to have the amount of money that we need for our communities to be serviced when it comes to education, housing, transportation, infrastructure, recreational areas, we need to make sure that people are being counted in the census, because that is going to help us. We all know that we're about to take a turn for the worse when it comes to the financial health of our states. The state is already in a large deficit. Without adding revenue to the state budget, we won't be able to cover the needs. And one thing that COVID has taught us is that the disparities that exist among minority communities, immigrant communities, communities of color throughout the state are far and wide. And so we need to make sure that we are counted so that folks can have the resources that they need in order to plug those holes that have historically existed in our community. So I want to thank you, Laura, for your efforts, for being part of our little steering committee uptown. We're looking to surpass our reputed target of being the top reporting community in Manhattan. We want to make sure that we beat that for the entire city of New York. And we're going to continue to work to make sure that we are making sure that the people who are most marginalized know that it is safe to fill out the census, and that is critical for our communities right now to do so. So I want to thank you for your efforts, and I'll be here supporting the reopening of the center and looking forward to seeing you thrive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, I think that sort of gives a good entry to introduce Amit Bags. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Amit Bagga?
It's Bagga, yes, thank you.
Bagga, okay. I wanted to be sure because one thing I hate is people mispronouncing or misspelling my name. So I always check. And so Amit Bagga is the Deputy Director for Census. He is here because unfortunately our Commissioner Julie Menon was not able to be present, and so we have the honor to meet Amit Bagga, and he will in turn talk to us a little bit about the census, what the numbers look like, and how does he foresee organizations such as ours proceeding in a way that is fruitful for the census. I know that one of my challenges has been, and most likely the challenges everyone that has been doing this program, is that folks don't always quite understand the importance of making sure that they are completing the census. Even if it takes 10 minutes, they always have a reason. Well, I don't live in New York. Well, you know, I don't have, you know, they'll like quietly say, no, like I'm not really like here legally or anything. It's like, we don't care. We just need to count. And so that is my goal, is to be able to push that in such a way that people will really own it and understand the need and the importance of making sure that they are counted. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Amit Bagga, and have him say a few words about himself and tell us so that we get to know you, and then we can go from there.
Great. Thank you so very much, Laura. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak with everyone this evening, and really would like to thank you for all of the leadership and work you have done with the foundation up to turn the foundation into a center of the community. I also do want to thank Congressman Espaillat. I've had the pleasure of knowing Congressman Espaillat and also the Assemblywoman for a number of years. I do bring regrets on behalf of Julie Menon. She really did want to be here, but she's had a family emergency that prevented her from being here this evening. And also would like to thank the Congressman and the Assemblywoman for all of the work they have done over the last several years and their leadership on so many important issues, not just uptown, but citywide. So I'm Amit Singh Bagga. I'm the Deputy Director of NYC Census 2020, which is the city's first ever campaign to achieve a complete and accurate count here in New York City. The City of New York has never invested in ensuring that we have a complete and accurate count, and so this is truly unprecedented for the city. We are the largest campaign of our type in the country with a $40 million budget, supported by both Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Johnson. For more than the last year, we've been working with every single community across the city to ensure that every single community fully understands that the census is truly about money, and it's about power, and it's about respect. When you take the message of the census and you convey it to your average New Yorker and say, did you know that the census is what determines whether or not we receive our fair share of $1.5 trillion that the federal government allocates every year for education, housing, transportation, and more? That's what we get from the census. When you talk to New Yorkers and say, did you know that congressional seats, up to 2 congressional seats, are at stake here for us in New York? We could lose 2 congressional seats if we don't fill out the census. New Yorkers start to pay attention. And lastly, when we take the message of the census really being tied to the respect that each and every single one of our communities rightfully deserves, you know, that's a message that a lot of New Yorkers haven't heard before. When we explain that when you show up in the census, what you're doing is you're showing up for yourselves, you're showing up for your community, you're saying, I'm here, I matter, I deserve to be seen, I deserve to be heard, because decisions about me and my community and the way in which my community is funded need to be made with me and not without me. And that's what the census is about. That's how you get New Yorkers to start to pay attention. So we've been bringing this message about money, power, and respect to all 5 corners, all 5 boroughs of New York City for the last year. We've also really been emphasizing in our messaging something that's very important, which is that the census is truly very easy, it's very safe, and it is indeed for everyone. As you mentioned, Laura, it's 10 simple questions, takes about 5 minutes. This year, for the first time ever, the census can be easily completed online or over the phone, my2020census.gov, or by calling a 1-800 number. There's an 800 number that's also available in Spanish and several other languages that are dedicated lines. And it really just could not be easier. You know, it takes 5 minutes to do the census, and it takes less time for many people, it'll take less time to do the census than it will to, you know, curate their social media for the day. So we really want to emphasize just how simple and easy it is. Also that it is safe. Laura, you alluded to this, but there are so very many New Yorkers who understandably have such a deep fear, mistrust, distrust of the federal government. You know, this was the case even before the current president was elected, but certainly as a result of the incredibly disrespectful and scary anti-immigrant rhetoric that's been coming out from Washington over the last several years, there are many folks around the country who feel like they don't have a relationship with the federal government and the federal government doesn't represent them. Well, we're here to say very clearly, the census is absolutely safe for everyone to participate in. There are no questions about immigration or citizenship. There are no questions about criminal history, employment status, income, social security. It's 10 simple questions, and all of your census responses are 100% confidential by law. There is a very strict federal privacy law on the books. The Census Bureau cannot share your information with anyone, not with any other government agency, not with ICE, not with DHS, not with the police, not with the CIA, the FBI, and not even your landlord. And that's very important because we know there are so many people in New York City who are living in unstable housing conditions. Perhaps they're living far too many people to an apartment that is allowed by the lease. Perhaps they're living in an illegal basement. And, you know, in many instances, we will see all across the boroughs that people are afraid to participate because perhaps their landlord is telling them, if you participate in the census, I'm going to get a fine from DOB or from the city, which is simply not true. So that's really important for us to emphasize for a lot of folks here in New York City, because there are hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who do live in, you know, very cramped or unstable housing conditions as a result of the housing and economic crisis that we have. And then lastly, we really like to emphasize that it is truly very important. And why is it important? Going right back to the fact that the census is all about money, it's about power, and it's about respect for our communities. And so this is the message that we've been taking across the city. We're very proud to have created the city's first and also the largest community organizing program the city has ever seen, the New York City Complete Count Fund, which has given $19 million to close to 160 organizations working in all 5 boroughs, serving New Yorkers in more than 80 languages, educating New Yorkers, organizing New Yorkers around the census, even during the time of a pandemic. And we're also very proud to have a multilingual, multifaceted media and marketing campaign that has advertised in more than 24 languages across television, radio, social media, streaming services, you name it. If you've been anywhere in New York City and consuming any media in New York City sometime in the last 6 to 8 months, you have definitely seen our ads and seen them frequently. One other thing I do want to mention is that despite the fact that the census here in New York City launched the very, very same day that the mayor held his first press conference, sadly informing us that the COVID epidemic had come to New York City, our operation and our partners, including Juan, Rosa, and Naleo, who have just been the most tremendous, tremendous partners we could possibly ask for, working day in, day out. I think in Juan's calendar, there are 30 hours in a day and 9 days in a week. I don't know how he does it. I truly don't. But all of our partners together, we pivoted very, very, very quickly to make sure we were being responsive to the moment. In the absence of us being able to do in-person organizing, we immediately pivoted to doing an enormous amount of phone banking and text banking. So we have a peer-to-peer texting program. We have now texted more than 3 million unique New Yorkers. We've called several million unique New Yorkers. We've had hundreds of thousands of direct conversations via text and via phone in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, also many other South Asian languages, informing people about the census, the importance of the census, connecting them directly to the Census Bureau's hotline, taking them directly to the website. So we've been able to reach, you know, millions of New Yorkers despite being virtual and despite not being able to do all of the types of organizing that we would plan on doing. And we've also made sure that we're really reaching New Yorkers where they are. You know, right when COVID hit, we had a $2 million investment in our subway and bus campaign that Director Menon was very successfully able to negotiate out of that contract and repurpose all of that money towards digital and towards radio. Radio, we know, also is very, very important for our communities. It's certainly very important in the Spanish-speaking community. We've had an enormous investment in Spanish language radio here in New York City. And so despite all of the odds, despite New York City being the global epicenter for many months of this unprecedented pandemic, we have continued to do all that we can to ensure that New Yorkers know about the census. I'll add just one final point, which is that although it is true that New York City right now at about 53%, just over 53% self-response is behind where we were at this point in 2010, one really interesting fact is that we as a city, despite the immense challenges we have faced in the last several months, have been able to close the gap between ourselves and the rest of the country now in 2020, which really, I think, is an indication of a degree of success of all of our collective efforts, all of the organizations and elected officials and community groups working together. The reason that that gap, the closing of the gap, is actually an important fact is because the census is actually a national competition. So really, the question is, how close are we to where the rest of the nation is, right? And if we are closer to the rest of the nation today than we were in 2010, we've made some progress. In 2010, at the end of the census period, we were 14 percentage points behind the nation. Today, we are just about 9 percentage points behind the nation, and every single day for the last 5 weeks, our growth of the daily self-response rate here in New York City actually has outpaced the growth nationally. So we are very confident, we are very hopeful that over the next 6 weeks, when we still have the self-response only period before the door knockers go out and start knocking doors here in New York City, we're going to continue to close that gap, and we are really confident we're going to make big strides to get to maybe 4 or 5%. And so we really ask every single New Yorker, make sure to take out 5 minutes from your day. My2020census.gov, you would be doing an enormous service to your community and to yourself to ensure that we're all collectively getting the money, power, and respect that we are rightfully entitled to. Thank you. Laura, I think you're muted.
Unmute. Okay. Thank you. One of the, as you were talking, I realized that for us, it's always a challenge when we are not able to have that, that face-to-face contact with our people in our community, because we're all about, hola, como tú estás, ven, siéntate, let's sit down, let's talk about it. So this whole situation with COVID has really taken that away from us. And it is now a new challenge for us, because we don't get to do that. We don't have that piece anymore, which is the piece that I found while doing the work at the space and being able to talk with the shoppers and the folks that were coming out of Marshalls and the folks that were coming out into the train stations. We were still able to talk to these folks. Now we don't have that. So it's almost like, it's a new reality. It's having to restart, rethink, right? Become very creative as to how you go about doing this. I have a question, because I want to be sure. So there are specific communities like Queens, Brooklyn, that are very low in count. And so it doesn't matter that some of the phone banking that goes on may not necessarily be in let's say in our area in Washington Heights, but rather they would need help with calls in Queens, correct? So is that something that's expected of us as organizations, to really be part of that and help with those numbers being increased?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question. Really what we are doing is having a citywide activation that brings in resources, human resources, volunteers from all of the different organizations and neighborhoods across the city. But right now we are really focusing on efforts in the areas that are very, very low performing, because we need to make sure that we are really bringing those areas up as well, so we can bring the entire citywide average up. So I'll just give you a quick example of this. Due to all of the efforts and leadership of the Assemblywoman and the Congressman and you all at the foundation, Washington Heights is between 63 and 64%. Different parts of Washington Heights are, really performing quite well. 63 and 64% is 10% points ahead of the average, which is 53. However, if you look in Corona, which is, not a Dominican community, I think once a very heavily Dominican American community, today really is very heavily Mexican American, Ecuadorian American. All of the response rates for all of those census tracts are in the 30s. So it's half of what we have in Washington Heights. And, as you all know, every immigrant community in New York City has its own history, has its own story. Dominican Americans have been coming to work, have been a real enormous, indelible part of the fabric of New York City for a longer period of time than some other Latino immigrant groups. And so collectively, we want to harness the power of all Latino groups across the city to help, those areas of the city that perhaps may not be performing as well.
I think that that's a good, a good option. And I think that as New Yorkers, we need to stick together. And so regardless of where the help comes from, we do need to make sure that we show our best our best face, right, in front of these difficult times. And so definitely you can always, Census can count on us to be part of whatever needs to be done in order to increase those numbers, because I know that when I talk to people, they've always, their thing is always, oh, pero, los muchachos, and I say, no, you have to count the kids, because the kids have services like schools where you have 40 kids to a teacher. You have situations where there's overcrowdedness, and that mostly is due to the fact that we don't have enough resources because we are not being counted. So I try to bring it down in a way, and our volunteers as well, that is like in your face, this is the reality. You complain about this, but in order to fix this, you got to do this. And so they get it. And so I think that that's the kind of conversation that we need to be having with our folks. So I really appreciate you being here, because it helps us sort of bring us together in the way that we should as New Yorkers, So I thank you for that. So I don't want you to go anywhere, because I know that you had talked about Juan Rosa having like 30 hours on his calendar. I think I know him since he had more or less like 40 to 45 hours a week to work with. And I know that I can tell you that he is somebody, and not because he's here, but he is somebody well respected in our community because of the work that he has continued to do in spite of obstacles and things happening in our community. His focus has always been about making our community better, making our kids better, making sure that our community receives its services. So I'll stop bragging about you, Juan. And thank you so much for being here with us. I really enjoyed talking with you. So I want you to share your experiences, and in ways that you can think that maybe we, Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation and Naleo, can maybe come together and do some sort of, work that will help improve these numbers.
Yeah, so I thank you so much, Laura, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on with the congressman, with Assemblywoman de la Rosa, with Amit, who I work closely with day in and day out at the New York City Census office. Amit talked a little bit about what the city did, but I just really want to highlight the fact that it is unprecedented. Outside of the state of California, New York City really has the most robust, better investment on census outreach than any other locality in the United States, again, outside of California as a state. So kudos to Amit, who is the Deputy Director of the office. Not only is he the Deputy Director of the office, but he's really someone who comes to this work as a real organizer, really trying to bring people together, really trying to raise local power, not power that comes from anywhere else and tells people what to do, but really getting communities together to exercise their power. And one of the examples of that work is the fact that instead of, the office was given $40 million, instead of them saying, well, we'll bring in 1,000 consultants and we'll bring in, 1,000 marketers and let them do the work. What they decided to do, and really guided by both Director Menon and Amit, is say, well, you know what, let's have the local organizers on the ground, like Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation, like Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, like the Dominican Women's Development Center. Let's have them do the census work. The communities trust them. They're the ones that are going to stay there beyond this year, 2020, right? So I really want to give kudos to the city for making that decision, and really thank you to Amit for just really bringing an organizer's eye and an organizer's methodology to doing this work. It really makes a difference. Like Laura said, my name is Juan Rosa. I represent the Naleo Educational Fund. Naleo is the National Association of Elected and Appointed elected officials. We are a national organization based out of California with offices in Texas, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, and here in New York. Our New York office works in 5 states, from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. Our heart is in Manhattan. Our love is New York City. We're very New York City we're very New York City centered, and it's a pleasure to be doing this work. The work that Naleo does is to promote Latino civic participation. We are nonpartisan, so we don't tell people vote for this one, vote for that one, vote Republican, vote Democrat. We're just interested in bringing up the Latino vote, bringing up the Latino political power. We do that by helping people become United States citizens, by defending the access to U.S. citizenship, defending it from becoming not affordable for people, maintaining its affordability. We do that by educating voters, by advocating for laws and rules to make voting easier for people, to protect the vote at the ballot box. And every 10 years, we do our Hágase Contar campaign, which is a campaign to count the second largest population group in this nation, which is the Latino community. Any census that falters and doesn't count Latinos accurately and completely is a failed exercise. Latinos are the second largest population group in this country, and as such, any exercise that doesn't accurately and completely include us is a failed exercise. The census is a constitutional process. It's in our constitution. It is the way that we divvy up political power in this country. We've been doing it since 1790. So a year after our current constitution was adopted in 1789, we did a census in 1790. And we've been doing a census every 10 years since 1790. The census, hasn't always been perfect. At the beginning, it left out people without land. It left out women. It left out, it counted Black people as 3/5 of a person, right? So they didn't count them as a whole person. And through the years and through laws and through advocacy and through protests and through lawmaking, the census now is really reflective of what America is, and it aims to count everyone in the United States without regards to immigration status, without regards to color of skin, without regards to sexual orientation, disability status. The census only counts people who are living in the United States. It doesn't go into any other detail of who they are. It doesn't exclude anyone as long as they are presently living in the United States. And that's I wanna set the stage. Laura, Washington Heights, like years before, is doing better than the state average. As of today, the state of New York has a 57.3 response rate, and the city of New York as a whole has 52.9. And I was looking at the census tracts in Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill, roughly Assemblywoman de las Rosas district. And most of the census tracts in Washington Heights and Inwood are above 62%. So Washington Heights is performing above the state level, above the city level. Manhattan is at 54.4%. It is doing better than Manhattan. It's doing as well as other states. One of the things that I think we can do is, first of all, reach within our own networks. Figure out who in your family, who in your building, who in any association that you're part of hasn't done the census, and become well-versed about what is a census, what does it do, what does it accomplish. Laura, you spoke a little bit earlier about the fact that we don't count our kids. In the 2010 census, 400,000 Latino kids under the age of 5 were left of the census, 21,000 only in New York, right? That means that for the last 10 years, the government has been making budgets for schools, for hospitals, for public transport, based on numbers that miss out. In the state of New York, 21,000 Latino kids under the age of 5, right? So we have to have those conversations with our families, with our churches. A lot of us are members of congregations, of churches. A lot of us are members of dominoes groups. And we know that people are still playing dominoes in Washington Heights. Have those conversations. Have you filled out the census? If you haven't, take 10 minutes. The census, part of the fortune that we have is the census is digital for the first time in history. For the first time in history, we have the ability to go onto a website and fill out the census. That website can be accessed through your smartphone. through your phone. It's easily accessible through a laptop, through a tablet, through an old hunky computer sitting on a desk. You can access the census. If you don't feel like internet is the way to go, there are telephone numbers so we can call in, and a census taker who is sworn in under Title 13, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, who is sworn in under that law, will take your answers. In Spanish, it's 844-468-2020. El número en español para responder al censo, de nuevo, es el 844-468-2020, 844-468-2020, y en inglés, si lo quieren hacer en inglés, 844-330-2020. If you want to do it in English, it is 844-330-2020. If you feel like, you know, the internet is not the way to go for you, you can do it online. You could do it by phone. Census takers, everyone who works for the Census Bureau, everyone who is a census taker is sworn in to protect Title 13. Title 13 is a law that prohibits census data from being shared with any other government, nonprofit, business, or academic institution. The census data, it is firewalled from anyone else. At the end of the census process, the President of the United States gets a statistical report on how many people are in each community, but it's statistical. It is not a report that identifies people by name, by ethnicity, by age, well, I think by age, but not, you know, it's not something that is descriptive, it's statistical. And that is what the President gets at the end of the Census Bureau. And later on, the states get that, Congress gets that for reapportionment, to break down the congressional seats each state gets, and to divide the state lines for state assembly and state senate. But again, those are statistical reports. So those don't say where Juan Rosa is, or where Laura Acosta or Carmen de la Rosa. It's only a statistical report. So it's important for us to know that. So when we talk to people, we could talk to them about what it is. I think, so again, talking to people, to our people in our families, people in our circle of friends, people in our churches, people that we come in contact every day, talking to them about the census and how easy it is to fill it out and how critical it is that we fill it out is really one of the most important things. What you're doing today is a perfect example. Juan Pablo Duarte is a cultural organization. You know, artists come to you, young people come to you. So the fact that you're using the platform to talk census, that's the way we're going to do it, right? It's talking census where people are comfortable, where people are going to.
Completely. I've you know, I always see things as a hodgepodge of things, you know, where if I have this group of people that we're able to reach and contact, then I want to talk to them about as many things as I possibly can regarding the, you know, the betterment of our community. So I try to take advantage when I have groups together that if you're here for an exhibition, guess what? You can also fill out your census at the same time. And so we've done that with a few of the groups when we were doing outreach. They were actually, I was surprised in how engaged they were once I said, this is what the census is about. They were there doing, you know, their event and doing an exhibition, but they did sign up for the census as well. So it is possible if you're creative about how you use your reach, you know, of folks. Definitely. So I thank you, Juan, because I think that we are going to be able to really do something together that will help us both, but most importantly, help our community. So I will definitely, we will, you know, talk after this and set something up, because I have, you know, some ideas, and so maybe we can work on that together. Okay. Okay. So we now, as you know, have as I mentioned before, a young woman. And before I introduce her, I just want to make sure that we that I say about the foundation and the importance of us to try and get back into some normalcy of schedule. So we are going to reopen on a limited basis, being that we are inside of a Port Authority space. there are quite a few different guidelines that we now need to follow. I mean, I just finished signing off like 5 pages worth of, these are the guidelines when you open, and, you can do this and you can do this, but you can't do this. And so you have to agree to all of that. And so, of course, whatever we do, we will make sure that we do it in a way that is safe, and in a way that we abide by what those guidelines are, so that we can keep our guests and our community safe. So we are going to reopen starting Monday, July 20th. And when we do start, we will begin with a schedule of 12 noon to 5 p.m. to start. And then we will progressively just change that as we find the needs are met. So with that, one of the things that I thought were really important is because our next guest, Paloma Garcia, is a Dominican French. I just learned today is a combination Dominican French visual artist. And her exhibition was actually the one that was going to be coming up during the time of when COVID happened. So she never got the opportunity to do that. And so when this whole situation was changed and now we can reopen, the first person I thought of was her, because I said, oh, this will be the perfect opportunity for her to do her exhibition presented, and it will have to be virtual, right? We will no longer be able to hold the group receptions that we would hold in the space, but we are still able to invite folks to come and watch the exhibit, enjoy the exhibit, while also doing virtually, but also allowing them to come and visit us at the space between the hours of 12 and 5, Tuesday through Saturday, and also adhering to the social distancing guidelines at the space. So it's the best of both worlds. We can now do a virtual as well as allowing them to come in person and look and enjoy the exhibition. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you a wonderful young lady, and someone that has been consistent with me as much as her desire to really show her work. And I want her to speak about a few things about herself and how she got where she is, what made her want to do this exhibit. And so I will introduce to you the beautiful young lady, Paloma Garcia, our Dominican French visual artist. Paloma?
All right. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to me. So indeed, I'm a visual artist, and I specialize in painting and cartoon animation. I studied animation in France and academic paint and drawing here in New York City. I've worked with numerous animation projects for cartoon animation studios, and I have exhibited my work in many galleries. Most of the exhibitions that I did showcased portrait paintings and environmental focus work. Lately, though, my main point of artistic interest has been the promotion of the Taino culture through my art. And for those who don't necessarily know, the Tainos are the indigenous from the Caribbean, and the first one that interacted with Christopher Columbus when he came to the Americas. So we cannot really talk about Dominican Caribbean cultural heritage without discussing our Taino ancestry. And
so Paloma, just real quick, does this mean that there were people there before Columbus arrived?
Yes, and the interesting thing is that
oh, look at that surprise!
No, yeah, of course. They are the ones. The Tainos are the ones that welcome Christopher Columbus. And the interesting thing is that not a lot of people in the islands are aware about the Taino heritage that we have in our folklore. So I thought that was weird, and at the same time, I was surprised that Taino ancestry has been silenced for so long, and yeah, that people don't really know about it, including myself. There's been progress in the past decade, but a lot still needs to be done to bring awareness about our history, and what better way than art to do that. So back in 2014, a Dominican singer named Irka Mateo got in touch with me to create a cartoon animated short film based on Taino mythology. And the purpose of this teaser was to look for funding to create a longer film. The teaser only lasts a few seconds, but when it was finished and released, we were really surprised to see how the public responded to it. It was really positive, and people really wanted, I mean, the Latino community really wanted to see more about it. We got published in the national newspaper of the Dominican Republic, and I also got the chance to make a presentation about our work at the United Nations. So as time went by, I really got interested about the environmental connection that Tainos have with nature. So I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I lived there until I was 6. My family is from a region called Samaná, and which is near the ocean. And each time I would go back to the country from abroad, I was really shocked by the environmental destruction that was happening on the island. And partly was because of tourism, and the other one was because people don't necessarily was educated, and they would throw a lot of the garbage, and a lot of deforestation was happening, and high levels of river and ocean contamination, and that really broke my heart, and I felt like I had to do something about it. So I grew up in different countries, but the ones that were really fundamental for my artistical education were Bolivia, Canada, and the US. Where I got the opportunity to interact with different indigenous communities. And what started happening is that I started seeing commonalities between them. So commonalities between the Caribbean, North America, South America. And one of the most important common characteristic between them is their love and respect for the environment. And I feel like this is a theme that is so important to talk about with everything that's happening nowadays, and how generations are envisioning the future. Those are themes that are very, very important, yes, to discuss nowadays. So knowing the net level of corruption and lack of access to education in the Dominican Republic, I decided, yes, to focus on Taino heritage as a way of promoting environmental protection. For me, it was important to really do educational work for younger generations, and it became important for me to interact with other indigenous communities and see how they were on their end contributing to the protection of the environment. Mm-hmm. This has allowed me to interact with different community leaders and major institutions such as the National Museum of the American Indian. And last year, I got really lucky because my work and my mission got noticed by the Met Museum here in New York. And they asked me to create an artistic project that would promote one of their temporary Taino exhibitions. And it was supposed to be a live performance with Taino-inspired music, and my artwork projected on the wall as a backdrop. And the person who was actually going to sing is Irka Mateo, the same woman that I did the short back in 2014. So it was amazing because this was going to happen this fall at the World Cultural Festival at the Met. So I got really excited. I was like, oh, we're going to reach out to so many people in the community. This is going to be an amazing opportunity. And another opportunity that I got is the fact that I was invited by a Brazilian environmental journalist to join him and his team in the Amazon to study and have a better understanding of the Taino culture and therefore Caribbean culture. So a lot of specialists seem to agree that the ancestors of the Tainos originally came from the Amazonian forest and brought with them some of the animals, plants, and practices that we now find in the Dominican folklore. So one example of plant would be the yuca, the casabe, that's Taino. Some musical instruments also, like the guira, that's also they are the ones who transmitted that to us. So unfortunately, with the whole COVID-19 situation, the Met project and the trip to Brazil have both been canceled, and no idea when there's going to be another opportunity to actually collaborate with them. Because as we know,
trust me, things are meant to be the way they're meant to be. I totally believe that. And so one door will close, but so many others will open.
Yes.
So we get to enjoy your artwork, right, and your pieces. So I'm looking forward to that, as I'm sure you know everyone else is. When what are the dates for your exhibition at the Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation?
So it would be it would start the 18th. And it will be till the end of July of this month, and it will be till the end of the month. So yeah, so this has been a really great opportunity for me to find another way to show my work. And
sure.
And also I've always wanted to work with big institutions because I was, this is a great way to target a larger public. But I also wanted to work with smaller institutions and nonprofit organizations. So when you got in touch with me, Laura, this was really, really exciting for me. And
good.
And yeah, and so this is
excellent.
This is where I am right now.
And we're looking forward to enjoying your passion. We are really, I always look forward to not only meeting the artists, but also to sharing your work with the rest of the community. I think that's always a blessing. So thank you so much for being on with us tonight and sharing a little bit about you and what we look forward to having in our space. There will be emails and all sorts of social media, announcing your exhibition so that we're sure to let folks know when they can come by, and also doing and working on a virtual exhibition as well. So thank you so much, Paloma.
Yeah, sure.
And so now, and this is why I know that she's there behind my picture, Amanda. Who I want her to not have my picture, but actually have her come on, because I want to really thank her. There she is. I want to thank her for doing this with me. I had the idea of putting this together, and of course, I just have the idea. Then I say, okay, Amanda, please help me put it together, the whole Facebook Live and the whole thing. So she has really worked hard on making sure that this happened tonight. So I'm very grateful to her. And so when I say that she makes sure that I have my stuff together, she even made a little note to me and texted me, and she said that in my opening, there's a few things that I needed to do, which of course I didn't do, but I'm going to do now because it goes into what our next Facebook Live meeting or panel or conversation will be, and one that we are already working on, and we have a save the date for this conversation, because I think that given the time that we are experiencing right now, it is the thing that we must do. I have always been conservative about the foundation. I have always tried to stay neutral when things have arisen, and I feel that the time has come where none of us can be silent any longer, and we must do something to change the world in the way that it is. So because of that, I want to make sure that I follow Amanda's instructions and orders, which is that I must, and I appreciate her for doing this, is to thank and also honor the essential workers that have been part of this horrendous time in our country, the ones that are still living, but some that have died in doing their jobs and taking care of us. So we want to honor them tonight, as well as the healthcare professionals, and not most importantly, but also as important, also the Black Lives Matter movement. And in our next conversation, what we would like to do is talk about our race, right? And so I came up with the idea of, what did we call it, Amanda? Our,
Are we Black or not? I think that's the
you got
suggestion.
it.
Yes.
So that's the name of our next conversation that is scheduled to be done on Tuesday, July 21st, right here at the same time, 7 p.m. And it is called, Are We Black or Not? And so with that, I will thank you guys. We are perfect timing. Wanted to end by 8:15. It is now 8:10, but I want to make sure that I open up for any questions that you may have for anything moving forward, or anything that we've been discussing. I know that we've been doing Facebook Live as well, so I hope that people have joined in and have enjoyed what our discussion is. So thank you, everyone, and we will be in touch. Juan, I will be talking with you this week. We'll get in touch and talk about next steps. And I want to thank everybody for coming on and honoring us with your presence and your words and your efforts in making our community better. So thank you so much. And if no one has any other questions, the curtains will come down. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.